One of the most influential companies that's impacted anime and manga culture as a whole has officially died today. Studio Gainax, that has created classics like Gunbuster, Nadia, Neon Genesis, Fooly Cooly, Die Buster, Gurren Lagann, and even Panty and Stocking Season 1, has officially closed its doors thanks to bankruptcy. And this is the final statement for the legacy of Studio Gainax from Hideaki Anno himself that is now in control of Studio Khara, the individuals that are now making the Neon Genesis movies. I will get more into that in a moment, but the point is that Studio Gainax is a legendary studio that is well known for creating such cult classics that stand the test of time, and many people recognize just these series and how they've shaped anime and manga culture. To this very day, stuff like, for instance, Gurren Lagann and Neon Genesis is still shaping anime and manga culture. You can feel the DNA and foundations of those series really paving the way for stuff we get today. And the fact that such a legendary company is now closing its doors thanks to bankruptcy, it makes you wonder, how did this happen? Why did this happen? What really went on? And honestly, there is a lot you could talk about the subject that you could go into hours upon hours, diving into the individual news articles, to the scandals, to the tax fraud, fraud within management, to just the disgruntled, people in management, and how people separated from the company to create their own individual animation studios. There's a lot of history that is associated with Gainax, which makes a lot of sense for a company, a studio that has been around for 42 years. A 42-year-long legacy in history came to an end. And so when you have something that's lasted that long, there's definitely going to be a lot of things that's good and bad that's happened and came out of the company. And in this case, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, it's been more or less just bad news after bad news for the company than necessarily good news. And to really kind of solidify this statement, we got to look at something that came out in, like, for instance, 2019. We have the ex-Gainax president, Maki, getting sentenced to 2 years in prison. And basically, this really kind of showcases how the company was being run, how it was not being ran by individuals that really knew how to create products, they were not being ran by good people, and it more or less was just a spiraling effect that got worse and worse over the years. I mean, in 2019, you had, for instance, Hideaki Anno, the one that, made the actual statement that I showed at the beginning of the video. He reveals why he left Gainax and how they wronged him, how he was really upset with management, and how it changed its overall perspective and course, or like its charting course for what it should be as a studio. It's just, he fell out with the studio, and a lot of individual animators and directors that were a part of creating cult classics within, Gainax left the company to form their own studios. For instance, like Studio Khara, Studio TRIGGER, and a bunch of other studios associated along with that created their own studios because they no longer wanted to be associated with Gainax in just how badly managed it actually was. And this more or less is a really good summary of just everything that's happened over the years. That Gainax as a studio is just riddled with nothing but mismanagement, debt, fraud, tax issues. I mean, hell, there was an individual back in like the 1990s for Studio Gainax that was arrested for tax fraud. So I think it says enough that there's just been so much mismanagement with funds and everything for so many years that eventually them closing their doors and going bankrupt was just, it was bound to happen. It was an inevitable, so to speak. And it's crazy, a studio that harbors such a legacy of creating such crazy classics that still to this day, people talk about, analyze, and make hours upon hours long of content, of footage of it, I think says enough of just how special they were. And to see a studio go out like this, not in a joyous, heroic celebration, but more or less a dying whimper and a very pathetic end, is just crazy to see. And, even if you don't know much about Studio Gainax, you definitely come in contact with their works to some shape or form because of the influence of them. And so when I take a look at, like, for instance, this statement from Hideaki Anno that, is talking about the actual shutdown of Studio Gainax on, Khara's website, you could just feel the anger within his statement. Like, you get to see, like, right here, where he gets a little bit more personal, talking about, like, his history at university with his friends, the people that were a part of management and representatives at Studio Gainax. It's legitimately sad. You could see that Anno wishes that it didn't have to end up like this, that, the studio that, he started at, like, really making some crazy works with, didn't end up like this, but here we are, and it's just tragedy. It's really sad. You could just feel the frustration in this statement. You can feel the frustration in this statement, too, back in 2019, to, you know, all sorts of other things. Like, I mean, here's another statement that he made back in 2024 regarding the announcement that they were going to be filing for bankruptcy. You can just see that there has been a long history of just constant bad news with Gainax, in that Anno has been very disappointed with everything that's been, you know, handled or how it's been handled, and it's crazy, man. It's actually just sad. So, to get into the meat and potatoes of the situation of what all this means, and how does this affect series like, you know, for instance, Panty and Stocking, Neon Genesis, let's get into that. So you're probably wondering yourself, if Studio Gainax shut down, how did we get a new season of Panty and Stocking lately? Well, that's a very easy one to explain. So basically, Studio Trigger are the ones that adapted Panty and Stocking Season 2, and a few years ago, they managed to get the licensing rights from Studio Gainax, and that was why they're able to eventually make a Season 2. And it was very obvious for a very long time that Studio Trigger really wanted to continue Panty and Stocking in some shape or form. They just did not have the licensing rights. And the same probably could be said for stuff like, for instance, Gurren Lagann, because as soon as Studio Trigger really founded as a company or really trying to start to make a lot of anime, they instantly created something like Kill la Kill. And anyone that has watched Kill la Kill knows that it's very Gurren Lagann coded. It is pretty much kind of similar to Gurren Lagann. The story themes might be slightly different, but you're not going to tell me you just do not see the similarity in the way the presentation of it is done. And in this case, when you look at the entire situation, Studio Trigger for a very long time has been probably fighting for rights for not just Panty and Stocking, but various other series that Gainax has had. And obviously, we have Studio Khara, which I've been talking about already in the video with Hideaki Anno, and how he managed to get Neon Genesis from Gainax. For instance, Gainax now has given over all their licensing to these individual studios, like Studio Trigger now has Panty and Stocking, you have Studio Khara has Neon Genesis, and a bunch of other different licensing for these other anime are now for different people, different companies and studios that now can continue these series in some shape or form, either through adaptations like a Season 2, Season 3, a movie adaptation, a remake, you get the point. More or less, these series are no longer in licensing hell and held up in jail thanks to Studio Gainax. So the closure of Gainax is a good thing. It is sad, but also a good thing, because it means that these series actually can get some form of continuation, and actually the respect and love that they actually deserve. So this is the dying whimper of Gainax. Their legacy, the end of their long history of 42 years, is them dying in like a whimper of lawsuits, fraud, tax evasion, and their ex-president getting into legal trouble and going to prison for 2 years. That's their history. It's crazy. And so, I'll leave it at that. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe, leave a like on the video. It does help me out quite a bit. Leave a comment for the algorithm. Allows more of my content to appear in everybody's YouTube feed. But be safe. Chibi out.